Hi, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of Lowdown on Low Code. Thank you all for joining. As always, we so much appreciate you taking the time to listen to what we have to say here and to listen to our guests. If you like what you hear and you want to keep coming back, hit the subscribe button. If you want to share it with others, hit the like button and the share button. There's a lot of like-minded folks out there. Have a great episode today. We've got an old friend. Mostly we talk to old friends. This is really kind of the point of the podcast. If we really get right down to it, is it's just a bunch of play dates for us to get together with old friends we haven't talked to in a while. But one of my favorites today, and I've got a little bit of a story. So today we have Leigh Michl from Ultimus. Leigh, how are you? Thank you so much for joining us today.
Excellent, Rob, and I'm glad that I'm to be considered an old friend.
So when I left Forrester for a while, I came back to Forrester and I was in charge of running the BPM, later what we renamed the Digital Process Automation research stream. I got some great some great material and some great strategy and guidance from my predecessor Clay Richardson. I talk about that a lot on the conference. Obviously, got to work with John Reimer, but there was a moment that was really important to me and important to the research and important to what John Reimer and I ended up doing for 6 or 7 years after that, and have continued on with analysis.tech. So I had met Leigh for the first time. I was in our San Francisco offices, and we were looking out at the Bay Bridge. We have fabulous views in those offices, and working out at the bridge, and Leigh says, everybody's talking about digital transformation and all these initiatives are failing, and really what's missing in digital transformation is you've got to automate everything. You've got to automate all those things that are in the back office. Otherwise, it's going to be exposed in the front office. And I went, duh, that's it. And that was sort of that was kind of what married up our low code and our process automation research. So thank you for that. And take a moment and introduce yourself to the audience. Leigh, we always like to start with a question, which is, how'd you get here? How'd you end up in tech? How'd you end up in process in particular?
Well, great question. Given that it was just Thanksgiving, I'm reminded by my parents that from a very young age, I used to walk around in diapers saying BPM, BPM, and long before it was even a thing. So no, in reality, it's more like a Forrest Gump type of a story. That I was an auditor at a mutual fund company. And one of the assets they had was an investment in a venture capital fund. So they sent me to audit the valuations of these companies. And, the joke was my findings were so dramatic, they had to hire me. And in order to keep me quiet. In reality, we talked skiing, talked about my ski racing background, we kind of hit it off and started in venture capital in 1988. Fast forward a number of years, 23 or so. And we had an investment in Ultimus. Some of my partners had invested in Ultimus. And, there was an opportunity or a need for an interim CEO. And I drew the short straw. And after finding out where the bathroom was, appreciating how hard it was to do real work instead of venture capital, wishing I had been kinder to CEOs during all those 23 years, I started asking some questions. And one of the questions I asked is, hey guys, we do a lot of professional services. It seems like, folks are really looking for help and for us to use our platform to automate more mission critical and customer facing stuff. Is there any way to make it, more efficient? And the answer I got was no, there really isn't. All these things are different. All these things we're trying to automate are different. And, that comes with the territory. And, I said, well, I'm a new guy, but, aren't all these things where, you got a company or a person that wants something and you get some data from somewhere else and somebody looks at it and maybe under some certain circumstances, somebody else looks at it. Sounds pretty similar to me. I was assured it wasn't. And I said, well, okay, so if we have a bank in Panama that's used us for a loan application or a car loan application process. And we have a bank in Dubai that's used us for a car loan application process. You're telling me those are totally different? Oh, yes, they're different. They're different. And I said, well, so wait, what about if we have a bank in Dubai doing a car loan process. And right across the street, there's another bank in Dubai doing a car loan process. Nope, completely different. So that was my key, that there was something in there. There was a pony in there somewhere. And I went to my partners and said, guys, there's a pony in here somewhere. I don't know what it is. I don't know how long it's going to take. Would you like to invest? And the response was, we have a better idea. Why don't you take it off our hands? You and your team can take it off your hands and figure it out in your own time. So, we started finding ways to, to create reuse and to, capitalize on the similarities of things. We tried, putting our PS guys in one of a couple offices so they'd be, sharing ideas and whatnot, and cross-fertilizing. We tried, creating components that were reusable. But we finally got, our PS guys together with our core developers, some of whom had a lot of experience with a concept called intentional programming, or, application generators or generative programming, which never really worked very well. But when we got the PS guys together with those guys, they said, there's a way of making this generative programming work, where you can put all the commonalities in a certain domain model. All that's left that you have to do is specify the unique variations. And that's where the light bulb went off. And I said, there are, you don't come across these types of opportunities every day, and, jump on it, both feet.
There was a pony in there, as
Yes.
it turns out. And the fact of the matter is as much as we'd all love to believe that everything we do is incredibly unique, most car loans are more similar than they are different.
Yeah, they are. Absolutely.
And we sort of say, there is no magical car loan. There are magical variations to the car loan, which, which we think we'll get into a little bit. So there's a question we like to ask here of the folks, on the vendor side. And it's look, we look at all these evaluative processes, we look at all these, major, I did 30 waves over the course of my time at Forrester. And, we have folks here who've done MQs at Gartner, but the fact of the matter is that each product is unique, and it should be evaluated on its uniqueness, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there is an opportunity where an Ultimus account executive walks into a room and hears what the opportunity is and says, that's it. That's the one that we're designed to do. And it's not all of them, right? There is no single, there is no single graphic that says this is the best one at doing stuff, because there is no stuff. There's just the stuff that my work wants to do. What is somebody trying to do where it's that perfect fit for Ultimus?
Oh, okay. So, obviously, process automation, digital process automation, large companies, that goes without saying. But one of the characteristics that we found is companies that are kind of distributed multi-site operators. They might, operate 250 skilled nursing facilities, or have commercial laundries all around the world, doing laundry for hospitals, real estate management firms and the like. And what we can do for those guys is that we can satisfy the process requirements at the local level, sort of a local approval, and then the communication and doing it at the corporate level as well. So there's different rules, there's different flows at each one of those, you can handle the variations by type of facility, by what country it's in, and that's really a great fit for us. I guess on the more on the human side, we do well when there's a customer who's recognizes that Ultimus can really make a difference for their company and for them in their career, and do it within a relatively short period of time. So if it's a guy who says, no one ever got fired for buying XYZ, it's probably not a fit for us.
But someone did get promoted for buying Ultimus. I want to get back to that in just a second, and a couple questions down the line. But I want to switch gears a little bit, Leigh, and talk a little bit about AI, right? So we've got AI coming in the door, and I feel very conflicted on this topic, because thing number one is the hype is just huge, right? We don't even need your product anymore. AI, we're just going to tell a system what to build is going to build it for us, right? AI is going
Yeah.
to build all the software. I think we could just sort of say that's poppycock. But on the other side of the coin, there are things that are happening that we need our listeners to understand, that the market needs to understand. Get us a sense of where you think Ultimus is going to embrace AI in the short term, and then maybe get us out to a little bit of a flying car view of the world as well. Kind of what does the future hold?
You know, I think I would be remiss if I said that I think there's a flying car version. I just I don't really see it. I think that much like RPA or process mining, it's a tool, one of many tools in an overall end-to-end process. And so I don't see you stringing a bunch of agents together and replacing digital process automation, business process automation. But I do see it, helping with some of the really annoying pain points that are still in your process. If you want to have an agent summarize, the financial statements of a company during a loan application, that's great. But when it comes to then having somebody take a look at it, a human in the loop, that's really important. So the need for digital process automation is going to rise. We're finding the interest rises as people are excited and try to do new things. They quickly learn about humans in the loop. They quickly learn that that about orchestration, and they're not going to get away from explainability and visibility into the process, and get called up, get called by the board of directors or written up in the New York Times about loans that the bot made.
Yeah, I mean, agree. So I think there's something that we've hit on a number of times during the course of the podcast, and I'd like to kind of dig into it a little bit. You mentioned orchestration, right? And so, what we always come back to is, back in the days when you were in your diapers saying BPM, BPM, um, I mean, frankly, I dropped the term BPM in Forrester's research for a number of
Yeah.
reasons. One was there was just some heavy connotations to it. There was, BPM is big and BPM is complex, and it's like that's really not where I wanted to take the research. So I wanted to kind of shed that name, and that's where we picked up digital process automation. But the other piece that was really important to remember was BPM solved a really big problem. Modeling and orchestration is with state management, all of these things. They're very
Mhm.
difficult to do technically.
Yes.
And those are problems that BPM solved, right?
Yeah.
And my heavens, look at where we are today, where we're trying to add services, AI type of services inline into, an orchestrated end-to-end process. Some will tolerate probabilistic outcomes, some will not. But
Hmm.
but orchestration is still really hard to do. And I so much agree with what you mentioned about we're not going to string a bunch of agents together to build processes, at least
Yeah.
not anytime soon.
Yeah.
Give us a sense of how important the role of orchestration is to where Ultimus is going, and as well as for your customers.
Well, it's extremely important. I mean, it's the key. When you look at the alternative, maybe a huge portfolio of point solutions, um, really process is an afterthought with those folks, and orchestration is an afterthought. I mean, they look at their world and not the whole world, and really bringing this, I won't, for the lack of a better word, chaos and mess in corporations, from lots of point applications, lots of legacy systems, and you carry it to a logical extreme, and you really are going backwards instead of going forwards in terms of agility and responsiveness and so forth. So the winners, I think, of course, you would expect me to say it, but the winners are going to be the people who tie everything together very nicely, both from a responsiveness, customer experience, risk control, you name it.
So we take a process. I mean, within that world, right? You're in an insurance claims insurance, process, and somebody builds an amazing AI agent for using computer vision to determine damage. You plug it into your orchestration engine,
Yeah,
right? I mean,
yeah.
it's managed within the overall context for you. Lee, you mentioned very quickly this. Well, we don't want to be on the cover of the the New York Times. I always say Financial Times and the Wall Street Journal, right? There are things that will get you into big trouble if you
Right.
ignore things like transparency, if you ignore things like explainability. Um, these are inherent in probabilistic outcomes, right?
Yes.
And when you're using, when you're using an AI engine or an LLM uh, to generate what something should be doing, it is in fact always going to be probabilistic, and it's almost always going to be opaque.
Yes.
Um, how important is that? I mean, especially given sort of where you guys live, which quite often is in areas like financial services and other
Yeah.
highly regulated industries.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's right. That's extremely important. And um, it's not something that you're going to get around very easily. We but I'd like to rewind if I could just for a second, though. One is just when you think about agents and AI and your ability to leverage those things, you got to think really beyond just an integration or calling it and getting a response. In many cases, you have to make it useful in the context of a process. This isn't exactly what we're talking about, but an example I'll give you is that, if you're using, machine learning to extract invoice data, you know, great, you have this data, it populates a form, but that's really not enough in the context of a process. I mean, it may be for a low dollar value item where there's a triple match with your purchase orders and your receiving and whatnot. But you know, somebody under certain circumstances is going to be looking at what was extracted and try to figure out if it's right. So in terms of making something useful in a process context, we created, a digital asset that shows the extracted data on one part of the screen, and the other part of the screen is the original image, and you can click through and see. Now that's something that lots of folks have, but what they don't have is they don't have it in the context of a process. It's a standalone thing that says, okay, I entered the invoice data. Now what?
Right. So thoughtfully bringing the human into the loop, applying the technology, driving some efficiencies,
Yeah.
making sure that humans are taking responsibility ultimately for the decision process. These things are not necessarily easily understood. We did kind of rush, I think, into we rushed into RPA. I mean, if I sort
Mhm.
of think about kind of the hype around, we've done some research around agentic process automation and around the role of
Mhm.
agents and co-pilots. I think we rushed a little too quickly and a little too deeply into RPA. It was,
Mhm.
it was a useful tool, right? I mean, I surely want it if I can't, if I can't get to the API and I want to automate a process. It's
Yes,
a
absolutely.
fabulous way to give me straight,
That, yeah, really a lot of value.
really a lot of value in doing things that humans do repetitively and letting them and taking that. But we're starting to see kind of that same level of hype around agentic process automation, where we've got
Yeah.
these processes that are being driven. I think the original, everybody's sort of got their own definition of it. So I'm going back to the original academic stuff that came out about a year ago, and I got an
Mhm.
LLM, and it's feeding JSON, and JSON's giving it some structure. It's outputting to Python. Again, really cool stuff, really
Yeah.
interesting things that could be applied in context. But in my mind, in context with the right sort of, evaluation around risk and cost of it as well.
Mhm.
Are we in danger of like entering a new hype cycle here that kind of gets some of all the hard work we've done around DPA and low code a little bit derailed because people are chasing shiny objects?
Boy, we absolutely are. I mean, back when the RPA really exploded, it was hard to get anyone to listen to us. And it's just, why do we need? That's not what we want to do. Why do we need that? You're going away. You're going the way of the dinosaur. And like, who? What? Yeah, and it's the same thing right now. And if I could just take a little divergence, plug for analysis.tech, you guys did that report not too long ago on assessing the APA hype. And I really thought that was one of the better analyst reports that I've ever read. It was not only, I think, well reasoned by people who know what they're talking about, but it was well written and concise. And beyond that, it was actionable. And so, if you want to dig in a beautiful, quick read that's comprehensive, I'd recommend people look at your website and assessing the APA hype. I'm not just saying that to butter you up, but it gets right to the point that you're talking about. And there are folks out there saying digital process automation is going away, and those are folks who I don't think really understand much about digital process automation.
I would like to have a chat with some of those folks. And if you're out there and you really think I'm an old dinosaur and don't know what I'm talking about, and which is quite often the case, look, I could be as self-effacing as the next person. But if you want to have a conversation around this in the same manner that I was happy to have conversations around why RPA would never replace DPA, I would love to have those conversations and learn what it is that I'm missing here. Lee, let's switch gears again. I want to go back a little bit to that moment where you kind of were looking out at the paper edge saying, you got to automate everything, right?
Yep.
And if you're going to automate everything, I mean, we do a lot of studies on this at Forrester. I know John Bratton-Sevick over there is still doing great work around this really great survey stuff that backs up everything they do. And we're still seeing like 60, at least back in the last time I was doing these things, 60 some odd % of processes that were executing using Excel and email in a given organization. These are ugly manual wait state things that are clogging up your organization when you start to see companies like trying to compete in an online environment, or you saw what happened during COVID where you couldn't co-locate in the office.
Yep.
Things broke, they broke badly. How, in my mind, what you had said sparked the idea that the business needs to be involved in this. This needs to have a development environment where IT and the business can work together very closely and do much more massive scale of automation. Am I smoking the curtains here, or is that what we're talking about still?
No, I think that's what we're talking about. If you look at it from the standpoint of the customer, not the IT guy or the company, no one wants to, work with a company where they're treated as a bunch of individual processes or individual product lines or individual silos. And in a lot of the best cases, that's what you have out there, which is, something that we try to design a platform to get around. If you think about the job of automating, quote, everything, something as simple as, I'll take banks with credit approvals. You have your various loan products, there may be 6, 10 of them. You're operating in a variety of states. You're operating in a variety of countries. They might have different process requirements, different documentation requirements, different responsive timeline requirements to resolve, complaints or whatnot. And, you can't do that by automating each one of those as from the start with a slightly different flavor, and then hope to be able to manage it. I mean, the complexity just would rise so much that if you succeeded, you'd wish you hadn't.
Yeah.
And that's where we looked at it and said, you ought to, if you can do a lot of the heavy lifting for people, take away a lot of the things you do over and over again, take away the requirements that are usually left out of requirements that make the difference between something that's usable and something that's not. If you can group not only those common requirements, but the common requirements of families of processes together, then your job of what you have to do to create your individual process, whether it's a new loan product or whether operating in a new country, a new regulation in a country, whatever, it becomes much, much easier.
Yeah, and I think the other piece I might add to that, Lee, is the edge cases, right? So the happy path is always really cool, right?
Yep.
So but I always like to kind of relate these things back to my own personal life because I'm the hero of my own tales. So
right.
So we started analysis.tech, and I work really closely with Andy Bartels, and Andy Bartels is in New York State and I'm in California, and we needed to start a bank account. It's not that complicated a thing, a business bank account,
right?
Which you can do online in 10 minutes in many, many places. But the minute it turned out that actually Andy in New York and Rob in California needed to both have control over this account to some degree, we didn't automate that. You guys do that on paper.
Yeah.
and not only you have to do it on paper, but you have to have it notarized. So
Yeah.
Andy's in New York, he's notarizing things, and then they FedEx them to California, and then they can't find the paperwork, and it's like this is a nightmare. I went online to an online digital bank, and it was done in 10 minutes. But it's those edge cases, I think, where
Yeah.
we're also we didn't automate that. We brought in major SI and massive technology stack, and we spent 2 years looking at reconstituting your loan process, but we didn't automate that edge case, so those people are in a world of hurt.
Yeah.
Those are the other things where the business understands there's a problem here, and can be involved in if you have an efficient and effective way to push out new capabilities, you can do that quickly and easily.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, so Leigh, this has been great. I really appreciate you taking the time to come out and spend some time. Tell me about ski racing. So this was like little this is
It's a funny story, I'm not good at many things, but I was okay at that. But at the time, I was also living in Connecticut as I am now. And one of the unique aspects of skiing in Connecticut is the mountains are very small.
yeah.
So that gave me an opportunity to practice slalom, which is about a 500 or 600 foot vertical drop. Not a lot of opportunity to do downhill or giant slalom. So of course, I selected my college based on, the Bates College in Maine was the only Division I ski team I could make. And, but it was a real learning process because, giant slalom is a lot faster than slalom and requires different skills and stamina and whatnot. So after I think it was Middlebury College Winter Carnival, where I had taken the whole weekend to go from Maine to Vermont, and there I was in the starting gate, and I fell on the second gate of the first run. Then that ended my ski racing career, but
um,
I do have one of my 4 kids has gone into it and loves it a lot. It's a great way to learn to ski, but it's a huge commitment. Not much else you can fit into your life. In college, you can't take any classes that end past 11 a.m. in the morning. And yeah, so it's a happy memory, sometimes not so happy memory, but the love of skiing remains.
I had a business. I ran a consulting firm, a little small 10-person consulting firm when I many years ago when my son who's producing this was still a baby, and my partner was a brilliant programmer who had grown up in Salt Lake City,
Hmm.
played high school football, wrecked his knee playing high school football, found his
Boy.
way into ski racing, where apparently there was a lot of beer consumed, caused all kinds of problems with his family who didn't appreciate that. But
It's not the only sport that involves beer, by the way.
it is, yeah. Well, it was a personal story for him, but great story. Thank you for sharing, Leigh. Listen, enjoy the holidays. Thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate it, folks. If you want to find out more about Ultimus, Ultimus.com. You can find out a whole lot more about these folks who've been doing really, really good work for a very, very long time. Thank you, Leigh.
Thanks, Rob. A pleasure to be with you, and wish you the best with analysis.tech.
Thank you.